So I have my Delectable Mountain quilt on the frame, and with that I've stitched the top border, I've stitched all the blocks, and I've stitched the lower border. So now I'm taking the quilt off the frame. So I've unlocked my bars, and I'm going to roll this all the way like this, bring it all the way back, okay, bring it up like this. Now I'm going to remove the pins. What we're doing is we're going to turn the quilt. Now the first time you do this, it's going to be a little scary. The next few times you do it, it will get easy and easier. And why are we turning the quilt? Well, we're turning the quilt so that we can do our borders all in one piece. We want to stitch them all at the same time. So by turning the quilt, so this was the border that was done first, now I'm turning the quilt all the way around, and now I'm going to repin my quilt. So I've marked it and I know where I need to begin pinning, so I'm going to start pinning. Just a little bit about pinning. I use a larger pin. I stitch with the pieces like this together with the raw edge of my quilt to the edge of my leader, and my pins are going in the pin line I can see on the other side. I pin about a pin width apart from each other, so pin and go in. Now with QBOT I have my border. But let's just say that my border now is larger than the first border. So I may have to resize it on QBOT. I may need to tell it another to extend and do a couple more passes. Or I may need to take it to software. So know that the border part, what we're teaching really here is not how to make the border, but how to turn the quilt. So keep that in mind. Turning the quilt to do the border all in one path. So you just keep continually pinning. I do use leaders. Sometimes I take my leaders off the frame and I'll sit and pin. Right now I'm standing in front of the frame. I'm not leaning over. I've actually unrolled my leader enough to where I stand up and do this. You really don't want to lean over. That's when you get back problems. And you want to do this the best that you can. So you'll pin it all the way across. All right. Then you're going to roll it up. You're going to select 4-point scaling. So I'm going to keep pinning while I'm giving you some instructions here. You're going to select 4-point scaling on QBOT. And QBOT will incorporate those 4 points into the scaling process and make the design fit into the space. Now, before I turn the quilt, I would trim any excess fabric to about 1 inch. So I did that prior to you seeing this on the video today. I actually trimmed off any excess side pieces and straightened it out. Now, why did I do that? Because I want to make sure that my quilt top is on the frame straight. So give me just a moment to finish pinning these. Some of you are probably asking, why is my leader in 2 pieces? It's because I often put 2 small quilts on here, so I just treat it as one when I'm doing a bigger quilt. almost done. Completing the pinning process all the way through to the end. Even though for this border, I am not stitching to the end, but I do want my quilt to be taut to the end. So I've pinned it. We'll remove our pin. The weight of the quilt will help it to keep straight on the frame and not skew. So I'll roll it to about there. Then I have my bucket of quilt grips. 2 sets of quilt grips per 10-foot frame. So you need 24 quilt grips. 12 come in a package. You place them on your frame about a hand width apart. So I quilt grip this. There's one more. Lock my frame. So I've just rotated my border to stitch this border all the way across. Now, just a couple other tips. I stitched the full border, the border that went all the way from left to right first. Okay, this border will set in, there's a seam here. So when I go to do this border and QBOT asks me for the design, I have the design up on QBOT. Start 4-point scaling. My right upper is going to be in at least a 1/4 inch. Most of the time I take it in a 1/2 inch. And I do have a ruler that I use to position that, and I use my corner finder too. So my right upper, and I would like the design to end right on the seam line, so my needle is actually lined up on the seam line. Now I'm going to go to right lower. It is a foot width, or the same distance from the top, so I would use my corner finder if I was doing that. There's my right lower. I'm going to go all the way to the other end and do my other 2 corners. Left upper, left lower. Attach bungees before you do this. I have not attached my bungees yet, so you want to attach your bungees, because if you don't and the shifts, you're going to be slightly off. But I don't tend to put my bungees too tight. You want them taut, not tight. So here's a bungee. I would put it on my frame, attach it to my fabric. I'd pull it until it comes up, and that's enough tightness on that bungee. So this is turning my border. When this border is complete, then I'll turn the quilt around to the other side and do the same thing to the other border. So happy quilting with your QBOT, and don't be afraid to turn your quilt to do those borders. It sure does make it a lot easier than making it in sections as you go.